Have you ever redeemed or considered redeeming frequent flyer miles for a free flight? Did you know that the price of that free flight can differ considerably depending on which frequent flyer program you're redeeming miles or points from? What if you saved all of your hard-earned miles so that you could burn 12,500 of them for this seat to your favorite destination, only to find out that the person sitting right next to you spent much less? Well, that is because most airlines permit their frequent flyers to redeem points on their partner airlines. But partner airlines may have slightly different rules around how many frequent flyer miles or points are required to redeem a free flight. For example, you can redeem American Airlines miles to fly on British Airways and vice versa. But depending on certain factors, you often don't pay the same price for the very same seat. One seat on a one-way domestic flight in the continental US on American Airlines generally costs 12,000 frequent flyer miles, but you can pay as little as only 7,500 miles for that same seat if you redeem through British Airways program. Let's dig a little bit further into that. Hey everyone, this is Ben, and welcome back to ExploreInformed, where we dig into the details of travel, so the next time you go exploring, you go better informed. Today we are talking about the opportunity to save yourself frequent flyer miles by being aware of the different currencies and redemption rates between partner airlines. And we will focus today on American Airlines and British Airways. American's frequent flyer program is called the AAdvantage program, and they have a fixed award chart, meaning the number of AAdvantage miles required to redeem a free flight is fixed and based upon one, where you are flying, either within the continental US, between Hawaii, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, and the class of travel, economy, premium economy, business, and first class. And for each available combination within that framework, American generally has two types of awards. Mile Saver, the cheapest award, but with some limits on availability, but also the target redemption for most people seeking a free flight, and Anytime Awards, which have wide availability but do not provide nearly as much value for the AAdvantage miles you have so carefully accrued. And during this video, I want you to remember the number 12,500 because that is, again, the cost of an economy seat on a one-way domestic flight in the continental US at the Mile Saver level. Now, the British Airways program is quite a bit different, and not just because the name is a bit interesting, as British Airways frequent flyer points are called Avios. Now, British Airways program also offers free flight redemptions at a fixed cost, but the factors driving the price of redemption are different in one important way. Similar to American, the class of travel makes a huge difference, as does timing with both peak and off-peak redemption rates. But British Airways also varies award pricing based on the distance flown. So for example, in economy at the peak level, flights under 1,151 miles only require 7,500 Avios. Flights between 1,152 and 2,000 miles require 10,000 Avios, and flights between 2,001 and 3,000 miles require 12,500 Avios. Now this creates an opportunity for American Airlines flyers, as many flights operated within the US are 2,000 miles or less in distance, which means that you can use your frequent flyer miles more efficiently by redeeming Avios from British Airways instead of AAdvantage miles from American Airlines. And that opportunity again is available because American and BA are part of the same airline alliance, Oneworld, and you can book the same seat on the same plane on the same route using AAdvantage miles or Avios. For example, Dallas to Las Vegas is just over 1,000 miles, requiring only 7,500 Avios, though that same seat would require 12,500 AAdvantage miles if you chose to redeem American's frequent flyer currency. Miami to New York comes in very similar at 7,500 Avios. Chicago to LA is around 1,700 miles but only requires 10,000 Avios, still under the 12,500 AAdvantage miles required by American. And same with Phoenix to Miami, as it squeaks under 2,000 miles, therefore requiring 10,000 Avios. In fact, nowhere in the continental US is greater than 2,000 miles away from DFW or Chicago, at least as the crow flies. So no direct flight award from either origin will cost you more than 10,000 Avios for an economy seat. And you can reach all of the western and central US from LAX in 2,000 miles or less, and all of the eastern and central US from JFK or Miami. So there are plenty of opportunities to redeem a seat on American Airlines using British Airways Avios, and save yourself a few miles when doing so. However, I want to note a few things before we run out and try to book a bunch of awards. First, Mile Saver awards, again the cheapest and most desirable redemption option on American, are increasingly hard to find for direct flights, as American doesn't want you to redeem at the cheaper rates, or they want you to connect, and you must find MileSaver availability on AA.com in order to use British Airways Avios points at the rates I have mentioned. If you do find availability at the MileSaver level for the flights of your choice, you should be able to see matching availability on BA.com, British Airways site, and you should see the equivalent Avios price based on the flight's distance. One thing to note too, British Airways may treat connecting flights as more than one award, so often your costs go way up if you have to connect. So this little trick essentially requires that you hunt down direct flights available at the MileSaver level in order to achieve peak value. Second, occasionally American will run web specials with reward flights available for as few as 5,000 AAdvantage miles. Though these are hard to find and you will likely require a connection, but you can't really beat that rate with Avios. So if you find one of those, jump on it and take advantage. Thirdly, and perhaps most important, and also most depressing, many airlines are moving away from permitting passengers to redeem reward flights at fixed rates and are moving to dynamic pricing, meaning the frequent flyer miles or points required to redeem a free flight varies based on the cash price of the ticket. This is a way for airlines to control the value at which you redeem your miles and points, and generally represents a worse value proposition for us, the consumer and the passenger. Delta moved this way a year or two ago, and United very recently announced that they were moving in that direction as well. So American is expected to eventually follow suit at some point. Now, major changes like this are often rolled out in phases and don't often impact partner relationships quite as quickly, but don't be surprised if the landscape shifts considerably in the near future. Despite a few challenges, there are still plenty of opportunities out there to save with Avios over AAdvantage Miles. Now, you may be asking, how do I find and collect Avios from British Airways if I live in the US? There are several ways to do so. British Airways has a credit card, like most airlines, that awards Avios based on your spend. You can also transfer membership rewards points from American Express or Ultimate Rewards points from Chase into British Airways, which has been my method of choice for the last several years. And thirdly, you can also credit your flying on American Airlines to British Airways. And if you're asking how do I find out if I can save points using Avios on my favorite routes or my upcoming trip, I provided a few links below in the description that can help you map out flight distances and or compare options between different frequent flyer programs. So that marks the end of this show. I hope you have found this information helpful. The frequent flyer miles and points game, as some call it, can really be pretty complex. But I hope this was a good primer or introduction to some of the value available out there. I hope it also helps stress that you have to really understand and then work to stay within the different program rules and guardrails in order to return the greatest value for your hard-earned miles and points. If you have a recommendation or a tip about redeeming frequent flyer points, particularly on American or British Airways, please share with your fellow travelers by commenting below. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ExploreInformed. Hit the subscribe button below if you want to catch more of our future content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you folks next time.